Have you ever paid attention to the conversations you have with yourself when no one is listening? Those silent words that define how you feel about yourself, how you face each day, and that determine, without you noticing, the course of your entire life. Carl Jung, one of the most profound psychologists of our era, discovered something amazing, that the most powerful healing doesn't come from outside, but from how we learn to talk to ourselves. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Jung warned us. Every day, without realizing it, we create our reality through the internal dialogue we maintain. Think about it for a moment. What have you told yourself today? Have you been your best ally or your harshest critic? The way you talk to yourself has a power that very few recognize, and it's the first step toward true personal transformation. Right now, thousands of people are trapped in cycles of self-sabotage, toxic relationships, and lives they don't want, simply because they never learned to listen to and transform their internal dialogue. Jung understood this perfectly when he said, "Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul." And the first soul you need to touch with compassion is your own. Our unconscious mind, that vast territory that Jung explored with courage, records every word we say to ourselves. Every "I can't," every "I don't deserve," every "I'm not enough" becomes an instruction that our deepest being accepts as truth. It's no coincidence that you feel stuck. It's the direct result of the words you've programmed your mind with for years. But here comes the hopeful part. Just as negative words can limit you, conscious and compassionate words have the power to free you. Jung firmly believed in the process of individuation, that path toward becoming who we truly are. And that path begins with the language we use to describe and understand ourselves. Imagine for a moment that you could record all your thoughts for a day. Would you be surprised to discover how many times you've judged yourself? How many times you've compared yourself to others? How many times you've doubted your ability to achieve what you desire? This self-observation, this awakening to our internal dialogue, is the fundamental first step for the transformation that Jung described as becoming oneself. The modern world constantly bombards us with messages that take us away from our true nature. It tells us we're not enough, that we need more beauty, more money, more recognition. And without realizing it, we integrate these external demands into our internal dialogue, making others' expectations our own. Jung warned, most people are not what they believe themselves to be, but what they have been told they are. When you begin to pay attention to how you talk to yourself, you discover something fascinating. Many of those voices aren't even yours. They're echoes of parents, teachers, partners, even strangers who at some point left an impression on you. Jung called these complexes, those groupings of emotionally charged thoughts and feelings that influence our behavior without us being aware of it. It's time to ask yourself, how many of those critical voices truly belong to you? And how many are simply inherited patterns that you never questioned? Because true healing begins when you can distinguish your authentic voice from those you've internalized throughout your life. The first act of rebellion against what limits you is recognizing that you have the power to change the conversation with yourself. As Jung stated, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." And that choice begins with every word you say to yourself in the silence of your mind. For Jung, the shadow represents those parts of ourselves that we have rejected, repressed, or denied. They are aspects that we consider unacceptable and therefore relegate to the unconscious. But here's the paradox. The more we try to deny these parts, the more power they exert over us. Jung expressed it clearly. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms you. Your internal dialogue is the perfect reflection of your relationship with your shadow. When you speak to yourself with contempt, when you judge yourself harshly for your mistakes, you are rejecting parts of yourself that ask to be integrated, not repressed. True healing begins when you learn to speak to all parts of yourself, even those that make you uncomfortable, from a place of understanding and acceptance. Remember the last time you made a mistake and punished yourself for it? Maybe you told yourself things like, "I always ruin everything," or "I never do anything right." These absolute statements are not only false but deeply harmful. They create an internal narrative of failure that reinforces itself with each similar thought. Jung taught us that shadow integration begins with recognition. Instead of telling yourself, "I'm a disaster," you can learn to say, "I made a mistake, like all human beings, and I can learn from it." This simple change in your internal dialogue opens the door to compassion toward yourself, an essential element in the healing process. The word you say to yourself not only reflects how you see yourself, but actively creates how you will feel and act. It's a circle that can be vicious or virtuous, depending on whether you are aware of it. Jung understood this well when he stated that your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. This awakening that Jung referred to is nothing other than full awareness of our internal dialogue. It is the moment when we stop being passive spectators of our thoughts and become their conscious creators. And in that act of conscious creation lies the true transformative power. Think about how you would speak to a small child who is learning something new. Would you ridicule them for their mistakes? Would you constantly compare them to other more advanced children? Would you tell them they will never be good enough? Of course not. You would speak to them with patience, with encouragement, celebrating each small progress. Why not offer yourself that same compassion? Jung reminded us that the meeting with oneself is one of the most unpleasant. That's why we avoid it. It's true that honestly looking at our internal dialogue can be uncomfortable. We may discover thought patterns that embarrass us, limiting beliefs that have kept us stuck for years. But that's precisely why it's so liberating. We can only change what we recognize. When you begin to observe your thoughts without judging them, when you can say, there's that critical voice again, without completely identifying with it, you are practicing what Jung would call a form of healthy distancing. You're not denying those thoughts, but you're also not allowing them to define you. You're creating space for a new way of talking to yourself. This distancing is crucial because, as Jung pointed out, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Even our most fervent self-criticism can become a door to self-knowledge if we learn to observe it with curiosity instead of completely identifying with it. The transformation of internal dialogue doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, a path that requires patience and constant practice. Jung knew this well when he said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." Your path toward more compassionate internal dialogue will be as unique as you are. Where to start? The first step is attentive listening. Over the next few days, try to notice how you talk to yourself in different situations. What do you tell yourself when you look in the mirror in the morning? What words do you use to describe your work capabilities? How do you talk to yourself when you make a mistake? Don't try to change anything yet. Simply observe with curiosity. This act of observation by itself is already revolutionary. As Jung noted, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. By bringing your negative internal dialogue to consciousness, you are already diminishing its power over you. The second step is to question those critical voices. When you catch yourself saying something like, "I'll never achieve this," stop and ask yourself, is this really true? Do I have absolute evidence that I will never achieve it? Does believing this help me in any way? Jung encouraged us to question our most deeply held beliefs, saying that thinking is difficult, that's why most people judge. By questioning your automatic thoughts, you are exercising a mental muscle that you may have never used before, that of conscious discrimination between what is truth and what are simply habitual thought patterns. And in that space between thought and truth, you find the freedom to choose new words. The third step is conscious reformulation. Once you have identified a limiting thought, you can deliberately choose to replace it with a more compassionate and realistic one. It's not about deceiving yourself with empty affirmations, but about speaking to yourself with the same kindness and precision you would offer to someone you love. For example, If you catch yourself thinking, "I'm a failure," you can reformulate it as, "I have experienced failures like all human beings, but that doesn't define who I am or what I can achieve in the future." This reformulation doesn't deny the reality of your experiences, but places them in a broader and more compassionate perspective. Jung deeply understood the power of this type of internal work. "Your vision will clear only when you can look into your own heart," he reminded us. The mental clarity we seek doesn't come from ignoring our difficult parts, but from learning to speak to them with compassion. As you practice this new way of talking to yourself, something extraordinary happens. Your relationship with yourself begins to heal. And as Jung discovered in his extensive work with patients, when you heal your relationship with yourself, all your other relationships begin to transform as well. Have you noticed how we tend to treat others the same way we treat ourselves? If you are relentlessly critical of yourself, you likely also harshly judge those around you. If you deny yourself compassion when you make mistakes, you probably have difficulty forgiving others. Jung expressed it clearly. Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. This is the domino effect of internal healing. It begins with the words you say to yourself and gradually extends to all your interactions. People who learn to speak to themselves with kindness tend to establish healthier boundaries, choose more nurturing relationships, and communicate from a place of authenticity rather than from lack or fear. Jung firmly believed in the connection between our inner life and our external circumstances. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, he warned. Your internal dialogue, that constant conversation your mind maintains, is perhaps the most powerful aspect of your unconscious that you can make conscious. Think of it this way: if you constantly tell yourself that you don't deserve love, what kind of relationships will you attract into your life? If you repeat that you will never have enough money, what financial decisions will you make? If you convince yourself that your opinions don't matter, how will you behave in social situations? The words you say to yourself don't just reflect your reality, they actively create it. It's fascinating to observe how our perception of the world changes when we change our internal dialogue. Jung experienced this in his own life and with his patients. "I found that I cannot expect crystal clear water to flow from the spring if there is no crystal clear water at the source." Mental clarity begins with clear and compassionate words toward oneself. Another crucial dimension of Jung's work was his understanding of archetypes, those primordial images that inhabit our collective unconscious. One of the most relevant archetypes for our topic is the inner critic or inner judge, that voice that constantly evaluates our actions and finds faults in them. This inner critic is not inherently negative. In its balanced form, it helps us maintain ethical standards and continuously improve. The problem arises when it becomes dominant and merciless, when its expectations become impossible to meet. Then, instead of guiding us, it paralyzes us with its constant disapproval. Jung taught us that we cannot simply get rid of these archetypes, but we can enter into a more conscious relationship with them. In the case of the inner critic, this means learning to listen to it without being consumed by it. The acceptance of oneself is the essence of the moral problem and the epitome of a whole outlook on life, Jung said. How do you change your relationship with this inner critic? Begin by recognizing it as a part of you, not the totality of who you are. When that critical voice arises, you can say, there's my inner critic again. What is it trying to protect me from? What does it need to feel safe? This type of internal dialogue transforms the critic from a tyrant to an advisor, and that change makes all the difference. Jung also deeply explored the concept of the persona, that mask we present to the world. Often, there is a painful disconnection between how we present ourselves externally and how we talk to ourselves internally. We can appear confident and capable to others while crumbling in self-criticism when we are alone. This discrepancy creates an internal tension that Jung considered the source of much psychological suffering. The persona is a complicated relationship between individual consciousness and society, a kind of mask designed to impress others and conceal the true nature of the individual, he explained. The healing of this fracture begins when we learn to talk to ourselves with the same authenticity and respect that we try to show the world. It's not about eliminating the persona completely, but about ensuring that it is a genuine expression of who we are, not a facade that hides our true self. This process of aligning our internal dialogue with our external expression is what Jung called individuation, the path to psychic wholeness. Individuation means becoming a single, homogeneous being, and insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also means becoming one's own self, he wrote. And here we come to one of Jung's most profound teachings, the idea that psychological health does not consist of eliminating our negative parts, but of integrating them into a more complete whole. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become, he reminded us. That choice manifests first and primarily in the words we choose to describe ourselves. Imagine for a moment that you could hear the internal dialogue of the people you most admire. You would be surprised to discover that even they struggle with doubt, fear, and self-criticism. The difference is that they have learned not to let those voices have the last word. They have cultivated a more balanced internal dialogue that allows them to move forward despite doubts. Jung knew this well. Know all the theories, master all the techniques, but as you touch a human soul, be just another human soul. The shared humanity that unites us includes the universal experience of doubt and self-criticism. None of us is alone in this struggle. And what about the moments when we simply cannot access kind words toward ourselves? Jung understood that psychological change is not linear. There will be days when the critical voice seems deafening, when old limiting beliefs resurface with renewed strength. This is normal and part of the process. In those moments, Jung would invite us to practice what we might call compassionate distancing. You don't have to believe everything you think. You can observe those critical thoughts and say, I see that I'm having the thought that I'm a failure, instead of simply, I'm a failure. This small distance can be the space where healing begins. It's also important to remember that the change in our internal dialogue doesn't occur in a vacuum. We are influenced by the external voices we choose to listen to. Jung was a pioneer in recognizing how our social environment shapes our psyche. The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases, he reminded us. This means that part of transforming your internal dialogue involves being selective with the external influences you allow into your life. Do the people around you reinforce your doubts or encourage your growth? Does the content you consume elevate you or sink you deeper into self-criticism? These external choices have a profound impact on your internal conversation. Jung also understood the importance of rituals and symbolic practices in psychological transformation. Creating small daily rituals to reinforce a more compassionate internal dialogue can be incredibly powerful. Perhaps it's writing 3 things you appreciate about yourself each night, or starting the day with a genuine affirmation that resonates with your deepest self. These rituals are not simple positive thinking exercises. They are anchors for a new way of relating to yourself. As Jung noted, who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakens. These moments of conscious attention to your internal dialogue are awakenings that, over time, can completely transform your life experience. As you progress on this path of transforming the words you say to yourself, subtle but profound changes begin to occur. Maybe you notice that you react with less defensiveness when someone criticizes you, or that you can genuinely celebrate others' achievements without feeling diminished, or that you can take more risks because failure no longer frightens you so much. These changes are signs that your internal work is bearing fruit. As Jung said, ultimately, the decisive factor is always consciousness, which can understand and assimilate the unconscious and its contents. Your expanded awareness of your internal dialogue is creating new possibilities in your life. But perhaps the most significant change is a growing sense of inner peace. When we stop being at war with ourselves, when we learn to speak to ourselves with kindness, even in our most difficult moments, we experience what Jung would call a reconciliation of opposites. The parts of us that once seemed irreconcilable, our strengths and weaknesses, our successes and failures, begin to coexist in a more harmonious whole. This peace doesn't depend on perfect external circumstances or the absence of challenges. As Jung noted, even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness, and the word happiness would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. True peace comes from knowing that you can speak to yourself with compassion through all of life's experiences, both the light and the dark ones. And now, what's next for you on this journey? Jung believed that psychological growth is an ongoing process, an upward spiral rather than a final destination. The meaning of my existence is that life has addressed a question to me. Or conversely, I myself am a question addressed to the world, and I must communicate my answer, for otherwise I am dependent upon the world's answer, he wrote. Your internal dialogue is part of your unique answer to the world. It's how you process your experiences, make sense of your life, and choose who you want to be. Each word you say to yourself is a seed that will eventually bloom into the person you will become. Imagine for a moment what it would be like to live from a place of friendship with yourself instead of constant criticism. How would it change your relationships, your decisions, your dreams? Jung would invite us not only to imagine this possibility, but to actively create it through the words we choose for our internal dialogue. Change begins today with the next word you say to yourself. It can be as simple as noticing when you fall into self-criticism and deliberately choosing a kinder response. I am a human being doing the best I can with what I have at this moment. This simple phrase, said sincerely, can begin to undo years of negative internal dialogue. Remember that you are not alone on this journey. Jung spent his entire life exploring the mysteries of the human psyche and came to a conclusion that resonates deeply with our topic. Finding the meaning of life is man's most urgent task, as it becomes the spiritual bedrock that sustains him through all the trials and difficulties of life. And much of that meaning is discovered and created through the words we say to ourselves. If this message has resonated with you, I invite you to share it with someone who you think might benefit from hearing it. Sometimes the simple act of sharing a powerful idea can initiate a wave of healing that extends far beyond what we can imagine. Every time you choose a kinder word for yourself, you are contributing to a more compassionate world. As Jung reminded us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. By making conscious and transforming your negative internal dialogue, you are illuminating not only your own path, but also that of those around you. Thank you for this time you've dedicated to exploring with me the profound impact of the words you say to yourself. If this message has ignited something in you, I'd love for you to share your reflections in the comments. What kind word will you tell yourself today? What pattern of internal dialogue have you noticed that you're ready to change? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if you want more content that helps you delve deeper into the teachings of Jung and other great masters. Remember that the deepest healing begins with the word you say to yourself. As Jung taught us, the path to wholeness is not eliminating our difficult parts, but learning to speak to them with compassion. That journey begins today with the next word you choose for yourself. Thank you for being here. Until our next meeting, I wish you an internal dialogue full of compassion, clarity, and courage to be who you truly are.